everywhere now. You're on Joe Rogan. And I mean, it's complimentary. By the way, you got yourself checked, right, after the debate because you went in deep. What was it like for you, prepping, getting ready? What did you expect? We have Dinesh D'Souza on next, which we'll talk about with him. It was a big turning point in the Cenk thing because he always went low. What were you expecting?
Yeah, so I think that, I'd watched the last couple of debates. I always kind of scout out my opponents in debates. So I'd watched Cenk's debates with Ann Coulter, and then I watched his debate with Dinesh. And it seemed like it was the same tactic over and over, which was he would pull some quote from 10 years ago that somebody said, and then he would say, well, I demand that you defend this. And then as soon as they start defending it, he would immediately swivel to crowd, like physically swivel to the crowd, and then say, what he's really saying, he's racist, right? That was the routine.
See, I hear your impressions, and I wonder what I'm doing with my life, but I want you to continue.
Yeah, exactly. So I prepped for it like that was what was going to happen. Like he was going to come after me, with quotes that are 15 years old and try and take something out of context. And so I had, with me a stack of crap that was just like I was fully prepared. If he had gone low, then we would have talked Armenian genocide for an hour.
That's what I was going to ask you. That was my immediate follow-up. Was Armenian genocide included?
Yeah, I mean, that there was definitely material there. If he had called me an Islamophobe, I would have read quotes that he had stated about Islam back in 2005. Like, I really had prepped it, and so I was ready to go. And I think two things sort of threw him off. One was that in the green room, I was very cordial to him, but I don't think that would have mattered to him too much. I think that what really threw him off is that the last couple of times with Ann and with Dinesh, when he did those debates, it was definitely a majority Young Turks Army room, right? I mean, it was definitely his people, and so you can play to your people. When your people are there, you play to them. When he walked out, I mean, first of all, the crowd that showed up for my town hall was supposed to be like 300 people. They didn't move the room because it was 1,000 people who showed up. And then for the debate, they originally had it slated for a 1,000-person room, and 3,000 people showed up, and probably 2/3 of them were people who were fans of the show. So that meant that he walked out and he got booed. And so I think in that moment he realized, okay, if I go low and Shapiro hits me with Armenian genocide, it could legitimately end my career. I mean, it could be a serious problem.
I don't think there was that amount of forethought. I think he had just seen the feedback from the Dinesh thing. We'll have Dinesh on
That's
afterward.
Possible too.
Dinesh is obviously a formidable debater, but he's used to a certain level of decorum with like Hitchens, or I think he would debate with Dawkins. Even though they would vehemently disagree, they wouldn't go, "Your wife divorced you, it's bullshit." That wasn't what they did.
Right.
And by the way, did you at any point when he was literally saying, and I'm not misusing literally, but when he was literally saying, "Of course," did you feel like you were possibly debating my impression of Cenk?
There were a couple points where I started grinning because it's like all of a sudden Crowder's in my head. I'm just looking across the room, and it's like those old Popeye cartoons where you're stuck on a rowboat with somebody and they start looking like a hamburger. I'm looking across the stage, and suddenly Cenk looks exactly like Steven Crowder in the Cenk outfit, shouting, "Of course! Google it!" So, yeah. I mean, listen, I was happy with it just because I was happy he stayed substantive. I mean, for an hour, it was actually a pretty substantive debate. I mean, we did healthcare, and we did taxes, and it was only at the very end he tried to drop in the Southern strategy crap, which, of course, doesn't fly with me because I know too much about that stuff. So it was he tried that with Dinesh for an hour, and every time Dinesh tried to get a word in edgewise, he would then demagogue the issue.
Strom Thurmond, you're bullshit. That was
right, exactly.
I think you were ready for this. I think a lot of people, there was even just 2 years ago, it was the era of, well, we're legitimate media, and so Young Turks were just seen as YouTubers, and now we know that they're every bit as big and influential as traditional media, so we've done our homework. So that, where you were prepared for it, you understood what it is that they brought to the table. And I also think, again, there was a turning point where people have realized that that's what Cenk does, and people have seen his playbook. But I do want to ask you some more questions afterward. I wouldn't necessarily say he was super substantive or that it was unbelievably cordial, but I think you were. But I do want to, let's roll a couple of clips. Let's see the first one for people who haven't watched the debate. Please go watch it. I think they have the whole debate up at dailywire.com. A couple of highlights. Let's see the first one.
If money was speech, well, then if you go to a hooker and you say, "Oh, no, officer, I was just talking to her." Okay, money is not speech.
Final point here. When you say money in politics is bad, again, I ask you, Buddy Roemer gave you $4 million to start TYT. What did he expect in return? Should he not have given you money? Was the money not speech? It was just money, after all. It's just like a hooker, I assume. So are you the prostitute? How did this work?
It is every bit as bad as I thought it would be. But that was I think it was substantial because he was trying, I wouldn't say getting personal, but again, trying to imply character flaws of manipulating elections, and you flipped that on him. So I think even when he was trying to present a somewhat cordial appearance. That wasn't what was really happening. For more proof, let's go to another clip. Naki Jared, are we ready?
Yep.
All right, let's go to the clip.
If you want to get money out of politics and then you said the Young Turks cannot donate money to politicians, I'd say, of course, that's the whole point of getting money out of politics.
Young Turks is super successful. We have 80 million uniques. It's wonderful. Do you think Bernie Sanders would care more if you gave him $10,000 or if you dedicated your entire network to kissing his ass for an election cycle?
He didn't choose the thug life, but God chose his people. You said you prepared for him. Some people take a different approach. With debates, it's just be generally prepared. Like there are fighters who say, I never watch tape on my opponent. I just worry about me. Now, I've always taken a different approach. I wouldn't consider myself anywhere in your league as far as debating, but we happen to have a lot of leftists in the show. I think you need a base level of being prepared for anything. You know, it's jack of all trades, master of one is the original term, and then watch tape to prepare as best as you can for this individual, especially someone like Cenk who goes rogue. How do you prepare in general for your debates? Was this different from
it
usual?
really does differ by person. So, you know, there are people who have greater expertise on a specific topic than I do, right? I mean, if I were to debate somebody on global warming, I'd really want to do a deep dive into global warming before I did the debate because they probably have a higher level of expertise on the particulars than I do before I do my research. But, you know, when it's a general debate like with Cenk, then you sort of just have to look at his tactics. So the truth is that the stuff that we ended up debating on was not stuff that I had prepped. The stuff that we ended up debating on was almost like there was a list of questions that the moderator was going to talk about, and that went out the window pretty much right away. So it just turned into a general debate about all of these issues. Like I knew that Cenk likes to talk about money and politics, so I'd done my research about, you know, where he got his funding, for example, which you see in those clips. But as a general
former
matter,
Republican governor, right? Louisiana.
Was that?
Wasn't it former Republican governor?
Buddy Romer in Louisiana. And then I also mentioned, you know, right after I said that about him receiving money from Buddy Romer, I said, you know, are you in the pay of the Qataris? Also about Al Jazeera. Like I had, you know, I'd done the research on that sort of stuff because I figured that was going to come up. But most of the stuff I prepped didn't actually come up. I mean, again, I had pages and pages of research that I'd done to prepare for him going rogue in a number of certain ways. And when he didn't do that, then it just turned into sort of a normal political debate, and that's the stuff that's sort of my bread and butter. So normal political debate about issues like healthcare and tax rates, that's stuff that I can do off the top of my head because I've just been doing it for so long. I would say that I'd say this: if it were Dinesh who had the debate with Cenk on those topics, Dinesh would have done fine. Right, like that. The
it was meant to. The issue, the issue was he just went to prison and divorce.
It really is. You know, Dinesh is a good boxer. Marcus of Queensberry rules, and the way that some of these debates are, they're just MMA. I mean, and it's fine when you go in fighting Conor McGregor thinking that it's going to be boxing rules, but you know, I recommend that if Conor McGregor is losing in the 11th round, that if he's going to lose anyway, he may as well just throw a roundhouse kick at Floyd Mayweather, knock him out, and then that's the end of the debate. So
just to save face and say, you're a boxer, you'll do fucking nothing! You'll do fucking nothing! That's what he does.
Wouldn't that be the greatest end to any match ever, though? Like, if they have this whole boxing match and McGregor's just getting his ass kicked because he's not a boxer, and then at the very end he's like, you know what, just screw it. Just screw it. And he just, Chuck Norris, roundhouse kick to the face, Mayweather goes flying out of the ring, and then he's unconscious, and you see the referee just go pick up his arm because he won. That'd be amazing. It'd be great TV.
I also would pay to see you roundhouse kick Cenk. But, you know, he'd be wearing the proper headgear because we're civilized here. You know, it's odd. We've never once been invited to Politicon. Now, I do think that Cenk has specifically requested we not go, and I don't blame him after we showed up to Cenk's panel as Cenk. But I remember years ago when Lee Doran had a very small channel, Cenk invited him out to Politicon. It was in a room with like maybe 50 people. Same kind of thing. Got very personal. And what he tries to do is cut people off at the pass. Okay, right? This is what Republicans do when they say this. But really, and that's actually a very clever debating technique. It's the same thing in combat where you learn, okay, I'm going to step away from his power and counter. Same kind of issue. And he would hand pick people. There was a thing he would pick on this channel when I had 50-something thousand subscribers. Couldn't get enough of it, apparently. And now it's like our name is Voldemort. He won't even speak of it. So when did you know that you were invited to Politicon? And was this a mutual decision, or did they just offer Cenk you and he accepted?
No, so it was sort of mutual. So what happened is that I had done Politicon last year. I debated, or 2 years ago, I debated Sally Kohn, and that drew a big crowd and got some attention. And then this year, obviously, we've grown in size since then. I mean, we have a lot more followers since then. And so Politicon approached us, and they gave us a list of people. And they said, well, you can be on this panel or this panel or this panel, or you can do a debate. And I said, well, I'd obviously prefer to do a debate than a panel because what the hell. And they gave us a list of people who to debate. And we were the ones who actually said, if we're going to do this, give us Cenk. Let's do this thing. And then Cenk's people were like, yeah, that sounds good. And then if you noticed, like in the run up to it,
he was so cocky. He was so cocky. I'm going to mop the floor with him.
In the run up to it, I didn't do what I think. Actually, if you remember the debate with Dinesh, he leads off by saying, well, Dinesh, you came in here and you say that you were going to kick my ass. Right? I didn't do a lot of the kind of trash talking boxing match stuff beforehand. Instead, I basically said, let's have a cordial conversation. And that sort of forced Cenk into a corner a little bit because now, if I'd said it's a boxing match, then he could come out and he could do the whole, you say you're going to kick my ass? Well, you're a jerk. And instead, I had said, let's have a cordial conversation. And so it became, okay, who's the first person who's going to punch below the belt? And if he doesn't punch below the belt, then the debate is not going to go in his favor. If he does punch below the belt, that's what I was prepared for. So I was prepared for he was going to punch below the belt. If he had done what his typical tactic was, I was going to actually do back to him what he does. Right? I was going to deconstruct his tactic. So
I think that's different about you, and I think that's important to note. And this is kind of something we do on this show. We always say we match intensity. We had my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor when I was a white belt. He said, he was Brazilian. He said, if you go mild, they're gonna go mild. If you come spicy, your partner gonna come spicy. And that was we always learned. You give and take, and so that's how a white belt rolls with a black belt. You don't hurt each other.
He was also an Italian cook.
No, that was what he said. You're gonna go spicy. So we fight, and I remember this because it was very clear. Like you match the intensity of your opponent, and that's where we've had super civil dialogues with Mark Duplass. But when Christopher Titus came on and just said, "You don't care about X amount of children dead with guns," you do have to address it, and I think you do that well because most of your conversations are like this, are productive. I do think Cenk went a little below the belt with a couple of them, but you're not afraid to hit back, and I think that's the big difference generationally. Is you don't go there, but you are willing to match intensity. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
I do think that's a fair assessment. And I think that this is, not to get broader, but I think that this is one of the reasons that Trump won is because there was a feeling like he's willing to not only match intensity, but go further than the intensity level that's necessary. And if you're on the right and you've been watching Republicans get kicked around for years, you figure, okay, who's going to punch back? Trump's the only one who's willing to match intensity, and we can't do the kind of Mitt Romney-esque let's have a cordial debate routine when they're saying that you're strapping dogs to the top of cars and putting women in binders and putting you all back in chains. And so Trump never felt like that. So I think a lot of Republicans resonated to that, right? So I think that's sort of the same thing here. That's been my shtick for a long time, though, is the idea that if you go low, I'm happy to do that. That's been true ever since Piers Morgan. So that's nothing.